So adapting our workplace to the new normal, man, don't you hate that term, the new normal? We've heard it over and over again. Nobody really understands what it is because it's evolving and it's changing and we're adding to it. And then the government comes in and brings in legislation and then the government says, oh, but we don't want to be in charge of that. Maybe the health unit can be in charge of that. And then the employers like you, like us, we're all sitting back thinking, now what? What do we do next? Well, it's not just about COVID, which is the interesting thing about the new normal. The new normal is about COVID. The new normal is about how our employee population has changed. It's about the gig economy. It's about so many different things, so many different ways that we now have to learn to work with our teams, our people, the people that are attracted to work with us. All right, so during this presentation, we're going to be sharing ideas. So Trish and I will be chatting away. Please, please, please put your hand up if you'd like to, if you have a question about what we're talking about, or if you wanted to provide some additional information. This is meant to be as interactive as possible. And I know we always say that, and there's rarely interaction, and it's like that on every webinar. So, but that's okay. Please just understand that you are more than welcome to pitch in and say a few things when the time comes. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about what is the new normal. And then as part of the new normal, we all know we have some employees that are working remotely. So we're going to talk about expectations around working remotely. We're going to talk about the dreaded COVID policies. And Todd and I were having a conversation around that with respect to minor sports, just prior to everybody coming on and how confusing it is right now. COVID policies would lead us into employee wellness, industry regulations, and then there's the big one, the recruitment. And then we'll have a free-for-all for question and answer. Having said that, again, like I said, if you have questions throughout, please put up your hand, tap Todd on the shoulder, something so that we understand there's a question to be asked. All right. So at Ladder HR Solutions, we're a little bit different than most companies you'll deal with, which is why I wanted to take a couple of moments just to reflect on a few things. Throughout all of this COVID craziness that I like to call, we have to remember that our employees are not just numbers, they're not just figures, they're not just our workers, they're actually people, right? They're people first. They have families, they have different situations, everybody's got a different story. So it's important to remember that as we launch into understanding what the new normal wants to look like. COVID is also very trying on many individuals. We've had a lot of mental health issues come up in workplaces. We were already having mental health issues in the workplace. Now we have COVID to add to that. We have, kids who some parents have now decided are not ever going back to school, or at least not this year. And they're at home, and we want to retain these employees. And there are every story is different. So what we'd like you to consider is to treat all employees with compassion and care. And then also your company is unique. What works for you may not work for your fellow entrepreneur or another company owner or a big company or even the company next to you, because your entire situation is unique. Now, there's legislation, there's law that we absolutely must be compliant with, but the actual essence of your company is unique. And therefore, the way you choose to proceed with the new normal will be unique. And that's okay. So what does the new normal look like with respect to recruitment and to keeping your people healthy? This is why we're having a webinar like this. Because I grabbed this from the National Post. I don't know if you guys can see that it says National. Oh, okay, so it's just me with that bar hanging out there. Okay, so I grabbed this from the National Post this morning. And a lot of the new normal that was started before COVID with the gig economy has exacerbated with COVID and has led us into a position where we have to be really caring and careful of our teams now. This is why. If you look at the line, back in 2019 is when things really, if you look at the graph, back in 2019 is when the total vacancies really started to ramp up. But look what's happening in 2021. We've heard the news. We understand that the healthcare and social assistance sectors are very, very understaffed. But remember back about a year and a half, 2 years ago, where it says transportation and warehousing, they were the industry screaming for truck drivers. So to put this graph in perspective, the transportation industry is still screaming for truck drivers, and yet all the other industries, vacancies are ramping up even more quickly. Vacancies are ramping up more quickly than the transportation and warehousing. So this is just to put into perspective why it's so important that we understand our own company's new normals and how to ensure that our employees are completely engaged and want to stay with us, because we don't want to end up, our own personal companies don't want to end up on this trajectory where there are that many vacancies taking place. So I'm going to turn it over to Trish from here. She will be chatting with you about the rest of the agenda. And although I'm pretty sure I might interject once or twice because I have a really tough time just sitting quietly. So I'm going to mute myself though, I promise.
No problem. Thanks, Therese, and welcome everyone to this presentation. I think this one I feel really personally engaged with because, you know, working with several different clients, I'm seeing some struggles to get used to the new norms. Some things that people are doing that they don't even realize because they're sitting in their own homes. So what are those expectations, roles, and responsibilities that you have for individuals who are working virtually? In this case, it is really important to clearly explain how you'll remotely collaborate with your team. We talk about outlining expectations for each person and setting deadlines together and schedule update meetings for larger projects. But it's more than that. It's really interesting because at this day and age, if you're still working virtually, what you're seeing and what you've probably already experienced is the fact that, you're not only working virtually, but it's almost like you're bringing those employees home into the workplace. And so, an employee feels at home. Like I don't need to put on a full outfit in terms of, I'm on the phone, I'm at home. I've got people running behind me, perhaps. I've got dogs, I've got children, I've got, people ringing the doorbell and I'm home. And so there's a lot of interruptions. But what I've also seen is that people feel, I had a situation where actually someone was having a cigarette while they were on a Teams meeting. So it really is, although we think it's common sense, people start to lose sight of working from home. I'm in my home versus that when I'm in my office, in my home, I'm actually in the workplace, and what rules actually pertain at this time. So it is really important to set out those expectations. Don't assume that everybody's like, oh, well, this is just common knowledge, everybody will get it. It is really important to set it out in the beginning, and then hopefully you don't have to deal with those later on. So here's some things to think about when you're setting out your expectations, roles, and responsibilities. What are the new rules for your team? Core hours of work. Let's face it, the individuals, especially that have small children or, elderly parents or whomever they may be caring for, people with dependents that have disabilities, they're working from home. They can't necessarily work the normal hours of 9 to 5. I've seen clients who put a new rule in place that said, well, as long as you get your 7.5 or 8 hours in between the hours of 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., that's fine. You're meeting your requirements within the core hours work that are stipulated. Email response time, in terms of expectations of people who are responding, especially if you've extended your core hours of work. What are the expectations? You expect them to get back to you in an hour, in a day, in 2 days? A lot of this stuff, what I'm seeing is that a lot of these expectations are expanding. So while there's a little bit more leniency in terms of expectations, there also has to be borders to those expectations is what I'm seeing as well. Also, team meeting attendance. In some cases, I've also seen where, it's really hard to get everybody together. And so, you end up having a half meeting, and then you've got to have it again because you got to try and catch the other team members that weren't able to show up. So these are always a struggle, and always good to say, you know what, I've got this meeting set at Tuesday at 9 a.m. I expect everybody to be there. And then hopefully you don't have to deal with that, and you're not, your efficiencies go up too. So you're not, booking time with all these other people saying the same communications. And also communication is important. We're not connected. We can't just, talk to the individuals down the hallway anymore. These side conversations that we used to have, the water cooler talk, or, you're in the lunchroom and you have these conversations. Well, you actually found out a lot of information where you're not having that, and there's a lot more disconnectedness. And so ensuring, as a leader, ensuring that those communications are out, and really role modeling the fact that if you get a new piece of information, make sure you share it with everybody. Again, it's a real trick in terms of communicating well and then communicating too much and becoming overwhelming. So that's always interesting. So what can employees expect from management when working remotely? Again, setting the expectations. I expect you to be at these meetings on a weekly basis. The other meetings, okay, we'll try and work around each other's schedule. Being organized and flexible. Track your progress. How are you doing on some of the projects? Are you meeting the expected deadlines that we had previously when everybody was in the office? I tend to see a lot more, again, leniency in terms of, okay, we'll give you a little bit extra time. But you still got to get these things done. Emphasizing communication, ability to listen. So it's really important for management to listen to the employees, especially in this day and age, because what I'm seeing a lot of is and we'll talk about this later, but with the current more of a demand than a supply labor market, people are being recruited silently. There's a lot of passive recruitment going on in the background. So being able to stay connected with your employees, having them engaged with you, and ensuring that relationship is strong, is really important. So it is really important to listen to where your employees are at right now, and what are some of the barriers that are going on, what are some of their struggles, and what are some of the things that are working well. Again, building connections and being available to your team, building trust and celebrating the success. These are all really important things for management to keep in mind. Don't think that no news is good news. That's a big mistake, especially in these days. I tell you, the recruiters are going crazy right now, trying to fight for the same labor market. So in terms of expectations, it is your responsibility to provide guidelines, set boundaries, and review the basics when setting employees out on new projects or tasks. Again, it's just, there's not being connected. It's really easy for doubts and assumptions to come into play in an employee's mind. And you want to make sure that there's a really solid amount of clarity and expectations. There'll be questions. Managers should be accessible and provide clarity on priorities, on milestones, performance goals. Managers to keep you up to date on policy and operational changes and company successes. And tips for working at home are always really good. Just again, areas where you can keep connected with the employees. Managers will also require you to be productive during or close to normal working hours so that you can be reachable. And as a leader, if that's your expectation, making sure that you highlight that expectation. I had a situation, and I'm probably going to refer to a lot of situations. We've been at this working virtually for a while now, and there's so many different situations where people, I went out for a 5-minute walk with my dog. I just needed to stretch my legs, but you missed that important phone call. And then there's the leader is upset with the employee, but it was, it was a reasonable thing for that person to get up and stretch, and then they weren't available at that particular moment. So again, it's being realistic, but then also, there are expectations that employees have to make as well. So it's that balance that's really key to stay within. When it comes to working as part of remote teams, you should be ready to be flexible with the working hours. Although a concrete plan is a must, be open to adjusting strategies as needed. Again, you just don't know what's going on in people's lives. One moment the kids are in school, the next moment they're not in school. Even when the kids are in school and they've got a sniffle, they have to come home and we have to do COVID testing. Like, there's so many interruptions to the workday now that people just can't avoid. You want to be organized as much as you can, but you also need to be flexible with that. Tracking your progress. Managers should provide employees with a work schedule along with tasks they are expecting to have accomplished within a given time frame. This will calm employees' fears and provide them the structure they need to complete the task. As a project manager myself, I find it's so important to set okay, let's have this, let's talk about a deadline. But it's also, again, being organized and being flexible. Negotiate on that timeline. Allow the employee to provide input to that, to say, that's going to be really tough. I've got so much more going on. Can we push it out a little bit? But once you've got an agreed upon deadline, the likelihood of the employee reaching that is a lot higher. But also the likelihood if something comes up unexpected, they'll communicate with you that I'm not going to meet that deadline. Can we renegotiate that? But at least clear expectations are set, and and everybody can check in with each other. If that works, great, and if it doesn't work, then we need to take a look at it again. So emphasize communication. It's crucial that managers communicate with their employees to keep them apprised of deadlines, available resources, work-related challenges, and managers' expectations. So consider what communication fits best with the team culture. Is it emails? Is it text? Is it phone calls? One of the things that I've been seeing a lot with as well, and it doesn't matter what age category the individuals are in, there are some people that are getting really overwhelmed with all of this new technology coming at them. I've got to learn how to use Zoom, but then there's Teams, but then there's GoToMeeting. And then there's all the challenges in terms of making sure that your computer is adapting to all the different, technology that goes with those. Now you've got email, you've got Slack messages, you've got team messages, there's so much communication coming at you now. And so has to be a real balance. And so talking to them about, listen, instead of, communicating via email and having an email conversation, which leads to about 20 different emails, why don't we have a quick conversation at Slack or Teams message? Let's just quickly do the Teams message. Having the agreement as to where the tasks and information will be sent, which is usually email, as opposed to a quick question or a quick download of information being on Slack or Teams Messenger. It's really good to get into a habit as to where to go for the key information. If I have to keep opening up my flipping back to email and then trying to keep up with that, but now my Slack has 16 messages and then trying to keep up with that. So it does get very overwhelming. And even today, as I'm holding my phone, I've been doing virtual meetings for I don't know how long, but the glitches come up, and so we're taking that extra time to test before we start a meeting, but that doesn't guarantee that everything's going to work out. And so again, it's just really having the different availability of the different modes of communication, having patience because it doesn't always work, and then having the support there as well. I mean, that's one of the increased stressors that everybody's going with in the workplace as well, or dealing with in the workplace. So just letting them know that you're available and say, hey, it's okay. You know what? We all experience this. We'll just move on, or, we'll catch up later. So this day and age is really taking a lot of challenging your patience. That's for sure. So I want to put this out here actually, because it's really interesting in terms of the different modes of communication that organizations are utilizing now in this virtual workload. So I want to put it out to everybody else. What communication works best for your company?
One organization that we work with loves Slack. Like they have completely almost not even using their email. Absolutely everything's in Slack. So it's a very interesting, it's very interesting way to communicate, right?
So, as Therese had indicated, her and I both worked for this organization. Actually, this client is still a client of mine. It does take time to get used to it. I'm glad to see that you like it, because what the one advantage with Slack that I found, even though you can turn away for half an hour, come back and you see 16 messages on it, it's quick communication, and it leaves your email open for the more detailed information that you need in order to get a task done. So I don't go back to my emails and see like 50 emails waiting for me. I may have 50 Slack messages, but I can read it quickly. It's a great tool. You can upload it for free and utilize it. The organization that we worked with did use it for free to start with, and then they found that there's so many wonderful dynamics to it that they actually now have a paid subscription. The wonderful thing is that you can use different channels. For specific people, you can make them private. And you can have it on your mobile. And so individuals who are out on the field that normally you can't get a hold of, because Slack is, it's not unlike Messenger. It's not unlike, well, if Teams messages, it's kind of all the same concept. You see the little icon that comes up, just like I'm looking at the chat and it says 8. It's very similar. So you can just open it up, look at the highlighted areas and see the quick message. It is a great tool for collaboration.
I want to throw another tool out there, Trish. The other one it is a communication tool, but really it's a project management tool. It's called Asana. And what we use that for here at Ladder is that we assign people projects through this tool called Asana. And then within Asana, you have your chat messaging within the project, and then you can attach documents and you can complete your project and put it within Asana. It flips everything into a calendar if you want to see sort of your project management and how the tasks are being completed. It's a pretty powerful tool as well. And again, it's free. It's free with its limited package, which is plenty for us. We're 11 employees and we don't have any issue with the free package.
So it is really interesting. I think it depends on the size of your organization as to what works best for you. But there's so many different applications available. It's really interesting. The other thing I've seen, and I myself are making recommendations for other organizations. Now, this is your medium-sized organization, so under 1,000 but over 500, is looking into actually launching an employee intranet. An intranet is a wonderful tool in order to keep your employees connected. Easy for the executive to send messages out. It's a great tool. One of the ones that I love the most is it's called Unily, Unily. It's one of the cheaper applications or internet applications that are out there. Very easy to install, so your implementation is not as long as some of the others have been in the past. And quite honestly, I haven't even looked at what other internet companies are available out there. That one is one that I use probably going back 3 years now. But there's a lot of tools out there that if you can capitalize on it, it's wonderful. The other, actually, honest, I'll stop soon. But there's another application called Achievers, and this is a recognition service award application. So, if you're an organization where you used to have a cake and a celebration when somebody reached a milestone like 10, 20, 30 years, you can't have that anymore, right? And so Achievers actually is a great tool where you can you can basically put in a budget, give each manager an allocated amount of money, and it's like a point system, just like air miles, right? And so you can collect as many points as you want, and then you've got a catalog and you can spend those points. But it's wonderful for recognition. It's wonderful just even for peer-to-peer thanks and all that kind of stuff. It's just again, it's like the Slack concept. You see all these messages come up, but it's all recognition related, and it's kind of nice to it's a feel-good one too. But again, it's keeping people connected. And again, I can't stress it's so important to keep people connected because, again, a story I'll share with you is an individual recently left an organization, one of the clients that I provide services for as well. And during the exit interview, one of the reasons why she left was because nobody was contacting her. She lived alone, young woman, and really unexpected. And she felt that she was just so disconnected from her team, from the company, that she wanted to be much more connected. And so she ended up leaving and going somewhere else. And right now in this market, there's so many recruiters out there trying to recruit passively. These people aren't even working, but you have people reaching out to you and saying, hey, would you be interested? I can't stress enough that this is the time to really make sure that you're connected with your teams. Number 5, the ability to listen. So as a manager, you do require good listening skills. And it's not just listening to the words, but it's listening to the tone, because you don't have the body language there necessarily. You've got a little bit, but trying to read between the lines, trying to really that active listening and saying, okay, well, let's explore that a little bit more. What do you mean by that? Like, really try and get to the core of what their message is saying, because again, we're working virtually. It's not that easy to pick up on that anymore, like you would if everybody was in the office. You could see if somebody was really irritated. You could see if they're having a bad day, but you can't see that as well when you're working virtually. And again, in terms of if an employee doesn't understand the task at hand 100%, encourage them to ask questions. No question is a bad question. And the more questions are asked, the more you know as a leader that you're having better clarity coming across in the meeting as well. Building connections and being available to your team. It's important to share positive feedback. And again, one of the positives with Slack is you can open a fun chat channel. The organization that Therese and I were talking about actually has a channel that's all staff, and it's I think it's just called Positive Thoughts or Recognition, and that channel, you don't have to look at it if it lights up, but it's one that, if you're taking a break, it's fun to click on and see how people are thanking each other in terms of, hey, you got that call real quick and you addressed the customer's needs. Thanks for doing that. I was tied up on another problem. Or so it is a lot of fun to do that, because you talk about trying to grab coffee together. Well, it's not always possible, but you maybe send a message quickly to someone and just have a little bit of fun on the side, because you can't do that as much when you're not in the office together. There was, again, sorry for all that stories, but there was a client I was working with, and I've been working with them since January of this year. And so it's been going on for a little while, and I've been working with their HR team, and I'd never met them, and we don't live that far apart. And so I'd said to them, geez, the patios are open. I would love to meet you face to face. I would love to see who you actually are, and just, let's just go and have a coffee together. Maybe go and have a lunch together, just something quick, just so that we can actually see face to face. And you know what? It was a lot of fun. I'm glad we did. I had a little bit more of a trip to travel to get to where the others were, but I really enjoyed it. So again, it's whatever helps maintain a sense of normality, solidarity, and remind everyone that they're not on an island working alone. Really, really key, really important. The next one is building trust. So the trust between you and your employees is important when working remotely. It absolutely is. They need to count on you more than they ever did as a leader. And how can you build trust with your employees? Being punctual, carrying forward your habits in the office remotely. And remember, they look up to you. And for individuals they live alone, or maybe they just need someone to reach out to, connect with, you may be that person. And because you're their leader, that is something that can really make them feel better. Just by saying, hi, how you doing? It's a simple thing, but I can't tell you how important that is. Celebrate your successes. It's so important. I say that word a lot on this call today, but it really is. Working remotely does take it does take a toll on your mental health. And you should celebrate the successes yourself and with your team members. Celebrate the big wins, celebrate the little wins. You meet a deadline, you finish a project, and hey, you all connected without any issues. Everybody was laughing in 2020. The catchphrase of the year was, hey, you're on mute. And now it's like, can you hear me? How do I fix that? There's just so many things that can be distracting. There's so many distractions. And so if you've been able to achieve something in spite of that, celebrate it. Take time during a meeting to have the first 5 minutes about, hey, how's it going? What did you guys do on the weekend? Or what's going on in your lives? It just, it's like that 5 minutes where everybody can just take a moment, breathe, and then we can get to the task at hand. So COVID policies and what you can ask for. Okay, so you may be wondering what's going to happen in the future. What resources or guidelines do you have access to regarding COVID, and what are your responsibilities? Well, again, everybody I think is familiar with the changing environment. Now, the Ministry of Health or the public health is saying you need to have vaccination policies. And there's so much debate about what can be put into these vaccination policies. And I myself went on to the Middlesex London Health Unit and grabbed their templates. They have wonderful templates, but it's interesting at the end of them, it says, this is not legal advice. You must get your own legal advice. And so it just proves that use this template, but then customize it for your organization and make sure it works for you. And because you may have the capability of having people work from home or virtually, they don't have to come into the office. And so if they're not vaccinated, maybe you keep them there. Or like there's so many different circumstances. There's so many, people are different in every aspect. What one works for one does not work for the other. So there is a lot of information available, and as always, reach out to Ladder HR. We've been working with a lot of different clients, helping them at meeting their needs specifically. And so, tweaking here, tweaking there, but we can definitely help you out if that's something that you're interested in. Let's talk a little bit more about mental health and wellness. Again, this has really become very, very prevalent. 64% of Ontario workers would be concerned about how work would be affected if a colleague had a mental illness. 39% of Ontario workers indicate that they would not tell their managers if they were experiencing a mental health problem. And I'm surprised that that's so low, because there is still a stigma that's associated with mental health, and we don't want to think that our manager doesn't think that we're capable, and so we'll just hide it. Approximately 2.8 million people, or 10% of Canadians aged 15 and older, report symptoms consistent with at least one of 6 mental or substance abuse disorders in the past 12 months. I wish I had shares in the LCBO. Let's face it. I mean, the amount of consumption has gone up considerably over the last 2 years. I don't know if it's still for 2021. I'm hoping everybody's kind of getting used to their new circumstance and that, and they're getting back to health and wellness. But it's a reality. And so, what other substance abuse is going on? We just don't know. And again, it's really important to have tools and mechanisms in place that can help employees. EAP is a really, really great program to have, and it doesn't cost a lot. So, that's something to definitely look into. If you do have EAP, look at your usage and look at what different types of situations are going out there, and then say, hey, what is something that we can do as an organization to help out with that? So it is a very big consideration right now. In one of the clients that I'm working with, 50% of their accommodations are related to mental health. So it's gone up substantially. So be on high alert of changes in the mental health of yourself and your coworkers. During the pandemic, life continues. Yourself or coworkers will have the same stressors as they did previously, but they may become amplified by the pandemic. And I truly believe that. That's what I've been seeing, is they have been amplified for sure. So let's have a little bit of discussion. I'm just mindful of the time. I think we're at 1:20. So what might mental health and wellness look like? Slower response time than usual, fast response time, emails sent at odd times of the day, 3:00 in the morning, there's something up, lack of focus, missed meetings, and being disengaged. A trend of not turning on a camera for virtual calls. Sometimes turning on the camera every time can get exhausting. And sometimes you just want to, I just want to put my legs up a little bit while I'm on a meeting. Is that allowed? In certain circumstances, is it allowed? Anybody want to chime in on some of this? Like, have you noticed anything yourself in some of your employees, or in yourself perhaps?
Too, there's a lot of frustration. I've noticed in the past when employees are burning out, and burnout is part of mental health and wellness, right? Burnout is often associated with anxiety or depression. So when people are burning out, not only have they had too much to do in the workplace, they're taking the weight of the world on their shoulders. And that to me is a really good indicator that it's time to reach out to that person. I mean, hopefully you reach out before burnout happens, but burnout is a big one.
And on that as well, again, we're talking about a labor market right now where I think we go into this a little bit later on, but for the London and area, what do they call it? The London economic region, there's only actually, unemployment may be up, but there's only 5%. Like it's 5% of available employment. What does that mean? That means that a lot of people have dropped out of the labor market. And so there's only so much to go around. And if your employee is becoming disengaged, they could very well be looking elsewhere. And because the market is competitive for resources right now, it's very easy for someone to come in and start talking to them and convince them that it's time to move to another employer. And then you're in that boat where you're trying to recruit for that individual, and it takes a lot longer to fill that position. And so again, it's, mental health and wellness, staying engaged with individuals, checking in on them. It's important for the business, and it's also important for the people. So there's just so many aspects of that going on right now. We've got different regulations for different industries, what you should comply with. So make sure you understand and comply with all the requirements under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, the Employment Standards Act, Reopening Ontario, and essentially employers need to understand the restrictions that apply to the workplace as described in the roadmap to reopen. And these things, like Therese said in the beginning, these things are changing so often. It's almost exhausting to keep on top of that. But you know what? There's techniques that you can use. Talk to similar industries. As always, you can give us a line at Ladder HR. Just even I'm sure there's different chats such as Community Futures Middlesex. Even it's just different regulations, different considerations that are coming up and changing. I think I'm on top of it. I've been creating this one vaccination policy for our client for the last 2 weeks, and every time I turn around, there's a different aspect to it that I need to update. I don't know if everybody realizes, even the Human Rights Commission have put out a statement as it applies to the vaccination policies that are required of employers right now. So changing all the time. There are lots of resources out there, but I can understand everybody certainly being overwhelmed with this. So recruitment, did you know Canada's economy shed nearly 2 million jobs, a record in April on top of the 1 million in March? The national unemployment rate is 13%. It would be even higher had 1.1 million Canadians not given up entirely on trying to find a job amid the COVID-19 pandemic. 41% of Canadian employers are having difficulty filling jobs, according to a survey by Manpower. Skilled trades are the hardest jobs to fill, followed by sales representatives and drivers. At a time when organizations face a tightening labor market and the lowest unemployment in 40 years, most of the jobs where demand is growing are mid-skilled roles that require post-secondary training, but not always a full university degree. The requirements are going down as the fight for labor continues. Since this pandemic started, we have seen the need for recruitment support increase substantially. These roles are sitting vacant for months on end. It's important to be retaining your current employees by showing gratitude and being exceptional leaders. The typical role now takes 3 months to fill, and we're seeing a higher number of no-shows because it's interesting, and probably 80% of the last recruiting initiatives that I've undertaken myself, the last question I ask an individual is, are you currently looking at any other jobs, or do you have any offers on the table? And 80% of the time, the answer is yes. That is just so unusual. I've never experienced that before. So as a result, there's a lot of competition, and what happens is that compensation changes because people have to get more and more competitive. So again, it gets really expensive if you lose your current labor force. Focusing on them, making sure that they're okay during these difficult times of change is really, really important. And then going into the future, what does that look like? Well, for the next year, we're probably going to be in a similar situation. Maybe more people are coming back to work. Maybe more jobs are going virtual. I think the key here is being able to change, check in with employees and how that change is going, looking at new applications that are available to you, perhaps, but really staying connected.
Trish, I see there's a comment in the chat. How do we handle employees who won't vaccinate? Or is this a topic for another discussion?
Okay, so So it is something that I think, as more employers deal with this, we'll get better clarity. I know in the policies that I've been putting into place, I've been saying, it could result in a layoff without pay. It could result in termination. But I think the importance is to allow for a meeting to occur first. Find out what the employee's situation is. What are the circumstances behind that? And you have to ask the question is, how difficult would it be to replace that employee too? I mean, in this kind of a labor market, we can't say that easily to say, well, if you're not vaccinated, we can't employ you anymore. That's not a luxury that everybody has. And again, everybody has to take human rights into consideration, but the Human Rights Commission has really tightened that up. And so if you go on the London Middlesex Medical Health Unit, it will tell you kind of the circumstances of what a medical exemption looks like and what a human rights exemption looks like. But I think the key thing there is when you come up with that situation, you're going to have to look at it from an individual perspective, have a conversation with the individual, understand what their reasons are behind that. And then if you can, and it depends on your industry. Is it a position that you can easily fill? Do you start with a layoff or, time away from work that's not paid? It really depends on what the situation is. I haven't seen anybody do this yet. So in terms of how that went, I can't comment on that. But I always leave that open in any of the policies that I've developed for different clients is when that happens, the individual will have a meeting with human resources and the management to find out more about the background to this.
Yeah, and Trish,
that's all I can give you.
Well, you touched on something here, Trish, is that you need to have a policy. You need to have a policy about how you're going to handle this. You need to have a policy around what does your workplace look like with respect to COVID. A year ago, we were all talking about COVID policies. Now we're all talking about vaccination policies. So the first step is to put your policy in place. Once your policy is in place, you make sure you apply it fairly, yet individually, as Trish said, to all employees. And that's really critical. If you don't have a policy, you could get in trouble with so many different regulating bodies because you want to make sure you're treating everyone with the same set of rules. And again, the one last thing on the vaccination, the rules are changing almost every day. So to give you an example, 2 weeks ago, we got an email from our legal counsel here at Ladder, the person that we deal with regularly, that said, hey, everybody in the London Middlesex Health Unit now who has office space now must absolutely have everybody vaccinated or they're not allowed to work from the office. We said, okay. So off we went with Ladder and we did our thing. And now 3 days ago, I have a client that we were chatting with and their legal counsel has come back and said, no, you just need the policy. Don't worry about having everybody vaccinated. You just need the policy. You don't even need to track it. And I'm like, So the world, even the legal world right now, it's really difficult because the province and the country has not mandated, but various health units are mandating. And then you think, and when the health units come out with it, they say, well, it's a recommendation. But then if you read the Ontario Health and Safety Act, any recommendation that comes out by the health units needs to be followed, otherwise there's fines. But that hasn't been tested anywhere yet. So it's a really huge kettle of fish that's working its way. My understanding is that there are some cases going to court now where some employees have been terminated because they refused to get vaccinated. The employer is going to court, but nothing, we really don't, I really, really, really wish we could say, yes, do this. But what we do for sure know is get your policy in place and then treat everybody the same way based on their individual situations.
Yeah, thanks for that, Therese. It's just so true. There's just so much changing. But the policy at least gives you a really good ground to start from.
I think the presentation and the context, it's hard to kind of put a needle on and provide definitive answer, especially when it's such an evolving environment, right? But I think what you've really done here is shared some good insight, I guess, into the new normal and as far as the labor market too, because it's sort of a balanced discussion despite the challenges that we're faced in sort of implementing these sort of virtual work environments. and you've shared some good ideas and thoughts on how you can keep your employees engaged and that type of thing. And I guess, I really like the emphasis that you put on the mental health side of things, because that's truly the biggest impact, I think, of everything that everyone's having to deal with, and the uncertainties and everything else. And so I definitely appreciate the presentation, and individuals. They've got the contact information up here for Ladder HR. And so if people do have specific questions for Therese or Trish, I'm sure they'd be happy to respond and follow up to this. I'd like to again thank Therese and Trish for their time today, and as always, sharing some great content, and we look forward to further collaborating and working with you into the future.
Thank you so much,
Perfect.
Todd.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks everybody for joining us today. It was lovely.